All right, good morning. Well, good morning, no one at the moment, but in case people join us today for our final office hours for the Web Design for Everybody capstone. Just a quick recap, I'm doing a couple extra office hours because I'm not able to be on the discussion forums as much as I would like to get your questions, particularly as you're finishing up the course. So today is really just a chance for people who are working on something and really kind of struggling with it to try to touch base with me. I've had some luck with people sending me their URL, and then I'm able to debug what they're doing kind of live on air, which is nice for everyone, even if it's not your question, because I find that watching other people try to debug is useful, partly because you can see what techniques I use when I'm trying to debug, and also partly because you get to watch me mess up and stare at it and go, I have no idea why this is or isn't working. So I'm going to go ahead and take some question and answers today if people come up. Otherwise, let me go right here for just a second. Oops, wrong button. Q&A. Oh, wait, I guess I do have some questions over there I can answer. I'm going to go through questions. I'm also going to go to the week 5 submissions. I know we're in week 6, but week 5 to just give some examples of some incredible submissions for the design. These students really went above and beyond what was required. So let me take a quick look. I'm going to start with the question about week 2. In the week 2 assignment, do we have to draw a sketch of site on paper, or we have to show sketches in the device itself? I've been sketching in paper. Is that okay? And can I submit assignment on the 21st? Please also explain about week 6 assignment. All right, so let me click on that one and follow up on this one. So for week 2 is your design sketch, and really the purpose was to draw it out on paper. If you were to ever have a job or an internship or even a class where your client wanted a design sketch, it would be really bad form to actually hand them a completed site. You want to take out that pen and paper. In fact, let me see if I can kind of get this to go right here. And what you want to give them is you want to give them multiple pieces of paper where you might say something like, on my mobile view, I'm going to have a drop-down menu and a single-page carousel and the text down here. While on a large screen view, you might have your navigation along the top, the carousel, and the content next to it. So drawing these things out on paper makes it easier for your client to say, oh, you know what, I'd really like you to change this here or move this here. And really, it becomes more of a collaborative experience because you're not really in charge. Your client should be in charge. When people code it already and then just take screenshots of it, you're going to take away some of that free-spiritedness of kind of the give and take of what if you move it over here or what if you move it over there. There's a company in Ann Arbor called Menlo, and they actually have people called, I'm forgetting the names, but you know, human archaeologists or something along that line, where all they do is study the way they go into an office and they just watch people and they watch what they do. And they found that giving people pen and paper really kind of increases the creativity. So you want to be, you want your paper. As far as demonstrating it, what most people did, what I encourage people to do is in the assignment, you click on WarpWire, and then you can hold up your pieces of paper and kind of just say, hey, here's my mobile view, and then put it down and pick up and say, here's my full screen view and put it down and kind of talk about the differences between the two. For my students who I have on campus that I get to see on a regular basis, it's also really nice because when they start to struggle with the concept, we can go back to that piece of paper and say, all right, let's remember what you're trying to do, and let's really focus on this one thing. And when we can look at it, it saves a lot of the hand waving and the, well, I want to do this thing that was a thing, which happens a lot. Now, when you do your sketch, it's completely expected that your final project will change. It'll deviate from that sketch, and you'll end up doing something that looks different. That's absolutely fine. The week 2 sketch is to get you started thinking about the different components you want, but even more so, it's for you to see what some of your peers are doing so you can get good ideas from them, kind of change your own ideas or enhance them, and kind of make a site that you'll be proud of. So you can still turn it in. Basically, the course stays open until the next capstone starts, which is in about 6 weeks. So people can still submit. Other students who are still in there can still review. It shouldn't be a problem. But since the majority of the students will be finishing within the next week or so, it might take some time for your submissions to get graded. If it's not graded within the next 6 weeks, you'll automatically be rolled over into the next capstone cohort. But there's no need to switch right now. Just stay in this one as long as you'd like, or as long as you can, as long as Coursera lets you stay in it. And people will probably still be in there grading. Once you're done with the week 2, oops, that one.
You want to move that back at the top?
Yeah, I'll do that.
It's that, I'll do it.
Okay, yeah, I got it. Once you are ready to start coding for your week 6, basically what you're doing is you have some options. You want to make your page, you want to go through, you want to make it responsive, you want to make sure it validates. And then as far as submitting it for your peer graders, this was our first run at it, and I wanted to give students options. So your option was to make a video, in which case a lot of students were using screen capture software so they could show people what was going on their screen kind of live. Another option is to do a write-up. That makes it much more difficult because you need to be able to describe everything very well. And then another option which you can take advantage of is uploading a link to your site. I didn't want to make uploading a requirement because I know that there are some students who can't access hosting services. However, I've found from this course that it's so much better if students do host their site. It's easier for other people to look at it. It's easier for me to look at it and debug it with you. So I may try to come up with some way where in the future students are required to upload and host their site. If they're not interested in doing that, at the very least using CodePen so other people can see it is a really good idea. So when you submit, there's that option for video, for file upload, and for a written description. You need to put something in all 3 places because that's just how the software works. The software is looking to make sure you've put something. But it's absolutely fine if you didn't actually host your site to just put in something along the lines of http://google.com. I think a number of students have done that. But I really encourage you to try to host it. It's a great learning experience as far as moving those files back and forth. And also you should be proud of what you've done, what you've accomplished at the end of the course, and you can kind of put it out there and share with others. All right, so what I'm going to do then just for a few minutes until I can get back over here is I'm going to go ahead and go over to the discussion board and just talk about a few of the questions people have had. And that is this one right here. Okay. Just gonna let me make sure you're actually seeing what I think you're seeing. I want to get better at this.
It says at the bottom.
Oh, okay.
The sharing window.
Great. All right, so what I've got here is just some of the week 6 questions. And I wanted to kind of talk about it. Check your week 2 assignments. One of the things I put in was just similar to what someone asked is if you've submitted for week 2, there's a chance that no one's really been hanging out there and they haven't been grading your assignment. So I do have somebody who said, right here, Elaine mentioned that she just submitted the week 2 assignment with the video name Sketch for Final Portfolio, and she's hoping someone could jump in there and grade it. I will do that, Elaine, but I did want to mention when you post in here that you've submitted, please try to put down whether you submitted for this Scratch, template, or framework option. Makes it a lot easier for me or anyone else to go in and grade it because you actually have to open a completely different window and then I search and then I'm like, oh, it wasn't there and I have to close it all up and do another one. A few other people have been having trouble with the submission. Like I said, we're keeping it open so people can try to put it in there. If not, it's very easy for you to jump into the next capstone, but I really don't want people to have to wait that long. So feel free to kind of put in your questions here. The next question I want to click on is they have not done the URL. They haven't hosted it someplace. And it does say there in the submission that you have to put in that URL. So go ahead and just put in anything. It does have to be a well-formed URL. It does have to have that HTTP in it, blah, blah, blah.com. But you can either put something along the lines of CNN or Google or Coursera, Wikipedia.org, but you have to put something in there that's well-formed, even if it's not yours. I thought there was another one. Let me just take a quick look. Oh, well, that I haven't looked at, so I'm gonna have to look at that later today because that's a lot of code for me to try to go over. All right, so what I want to do right now, double check and make sure there's no questions. All right. What I want to show you really quickly is just one of the kind of outstanding submissions we had from week 4. It was by Claudio. I'm going to pop up the media just for a second. I'm not going to play it the whole time because I don't have sound on it. Let me just do this. But as you can see, as we kind of go through here, it's really nicely done. There is sound, but it's not coming through on my computer because I didn't set it up in time. But what Claudio does is he walks you through the whole site. You know, no one has to look for what's there, what's not there. He has the text and the description. So I'm not actually touching anything right now. He's showing off this artist's site, kind of moving the mouse around so you can see how he has the hover, how he has a video, a lot of different options. So I'm just going to sit back for about 30, 40 seconds. And so there's no sound, but you can kind of watch what he's going through. So before people get too freaked out about this or worried, I want to jump in and say, this is a ridiculously good website. This is well beyond everything that we covered in this class. He clearly went out, did a lot with something called modals, which is that kind of pop-up box. He has really great styling with the different fonts. You can see now that he's showing off his responsiveness, how when you go from mobile to large screen, you have that different navigation, and showing off some of the other things that happen when you go along that line. This is just, you know, a really beautiful example, not only of a great page, but also a great submission of someone who's trying to show off everything that he's done. Because there may be things that you had to work on that look easy when you're done, but, you know, really took some time. And it's good for you to kind of show that off. Again, went that extra step to show you that the pages were compliant, went right there to the validator site, put in the URL, and kind of showed you that each one was validated. So I'm gonna let this kind of run in the background just for a few more seconds while I talk about it. But this is one of the examples of a from scratch site. And if you go and you look at the code, you're going to see that clearly he didn't write all of this from scratch. He used some other people's code for getting some of these different things to work. That's still from scratch in my mind, because he didn't go out and he didn't get a template where everything was already placed. So there's a lot going on this site. It's really above and beyond. I'm hoping it doesn't scare away all the other students. But this is the kind of thing where even if you couldn't recreate this site on your own, I'm hoping that as you watch the demonstration, you can nod along and go, oh, I know what he did here, and I know, you know, why that code goes there. I might not know how it works, but I know why it goes there. This is also another great example of a site that is not in English right here, but we can still see what's going on. All right, I'm going to close that one off, but if you want to go and take a look at it, the site, it's in the by Scratch, and it's by Claudio. I'm also going to go ahead, and he included the link. So we can go here. If I did want to go and look at the page, I could kind of go and recreate it myself. And then here's the code. This is a very short written description. And of course it is, because that video showed everything. So that's fine. All right. So that was one example I wanted to show you. Let me click here for just a second. Oh, we don't have any questions. The next example is one that Juan did, and he did this one from I believe this is from the templates. So I'm going to click right here. Completely different look for this website. The first one I showed you was kind of this idea of here is an artist. So, you know, you're going to have a lot going on with the pictures and things like this. This next site is something that's going to be much cleaner as far as it's business-like. It's also very familiar looking, which makes sense because he used a template. One of the suggestions that people mentioned when they were reviewing this submission is that when you use a template, it's often a good idea to show what the template looked like when you first started and then what it looked like when you were done, because you can show some of the changes that you made. Even if you didn't do a lot to change the template from, you know, what it was originally, you can still talk about, I used this template and there were these parts that weren't very accessible. And so I tried to fix A, B, C, and D, and I was successful with only B and D, and here's why. So a great looking site. The important thing to know, again, when you're doing something with a template or other people's code is you don't have to understand every line, but you do want to make sure that you know enough that you can go in and you can change things. So I'm going to go ahead and close off the video there. Here's an example of he didn't actually host the site. So there is no URL for me to click on. Read the URLs before you click on them. So for instance, this one's called www.don'thave.com. So if I click on that, actually I shouldn't, because who knows what it'll go to. Apparently we can find our perfect car. All right. But I can also go right here to the written question or written description. He included the video, which is great. Then he went in here and he added, does the site validate? We have yes. Is the site responsive? Yes. And he kind of went through and mentioned all of his extra enhancements. Just in case you've never heard of these things before, the parallax backgrounds, that's kind of that idea of when you scroll, it has almost an animation-ish type look to it. Okay. So we're going through, right now we're just kind of going through, we're looking at the work people have. I'm going to go down. You can see that you might want to, people put in suggestions or comments, and just take a look at them, see if it's something you want to do, not want to do, and go ahead and submit. We've had some lively debates in the forums about what people should and shouldn't be including. Sorry, and hit stop on this one. What you should and shouldn't be including as far as on your site. These are not meant to be your final sites that you'll ever create. So while people have friendly suggestions for you, you can kind of take with them and do what you'd like. It doesn't need to be professional. We do have a question on here. Hi, Liz. Back again. Do you need to validate the CSS files? And the answer is no, you don't need to. You may have noticed that in that first example that I talked about, Claudio's example, I'm now worried in retrospect that I shouldn't have done that. It was so good, it's going to worry people, because he did go in and validate the CSS, but that's not necessary. Why it's good to know about, though, is if later when you're coding and your CSS just isn't working, your style isn't doing the things you wanted it to do, validating your code is usually a good way to find maybe some errors to help you if you're stuck on little things. But no, you don't need to validate the CSS files. And that's not just something I'm doing for my Coursera course. To be honest, I don't have my residential students validate them either. Maybe I should. Okay. All right. I'm going to go ahead and go back to the forums just in case we get anyone else here. Here.
Present to everyone.
Thank you. Okay. This is the one I wanted to talk about. Oh, okay. Someone answered within the past 7 minutes. Okay, so I can go right in here and almost go live. This was from Marco, and not surprisingly, things are taking longer than expected. I mean, that's kind of the point of Coursera in many ways, is that you can get started and then life comes along and you need to leave it for a few weeks, and then you come back to it, and you finish it when you can. He doesn't want to wait too long. What can you do? As I mentioned, just submit when you finish. My hope is that we'll have enough people around, and Coursera is going to leave it open, that we can still kind of grade submissions as they're kind of dribbling in. What we said is, I was in trouble in the template at the beginning. It cost me some time. I don't want to compromise the quality just for passing the course. That's a really good attitude. I always encourage students is that you do want to make sure that you're not just doing the bare minimum to pass the course, and you're trying to make something where you're learning from it. But at the same time, I really need to stress to everyone that at some point you need to walk away from your website. When you get to good enough plus a little bit more, you need to think about it and go, hey, I've got everything I need. I think I'm going to go ahead and submit this, even if it's not the final thing I want it to be, because that way you'll get hopefully some comments from other people who might tell you, you know what, this looks great. I've had students who have really struggled to add little things to their site. And then when they actually demoed it, other students and their peers said, oh, you know what? We actually liked the original version better. So it's great to get some feedback and some ideas from other people to kind of guide you as to when's a good stopping point. So definitely make something that you're proud of, but realize you don't need the perfect site. This is really about getting you started. Then for some of you, getting you excited enough to go on to other courses. For some students, it's just going to be enough to go like, hey, I did it. That's great. And it is a really great thing that you've taken the time to learn how to do this. Back here. Oh, this was the trouble with submission. Some people have been having some trouble with WarpWire. I have been in contact with people at WarpWire. I go through here when I can. I find these links, and then I send them to the WarpWire plus some of the people I know directly there. So go ahead and come on back. I can kind of do a quick look on this, but I've never actually seen that issue of not having a private connection on a different page. I would try one more time to do it. Sometimes just with servers down, it's worth it. I don't want you spending a lot of time on software that isn't your own, but please, whenever these things don't work, when the server's down or you're getting a kind of awkward or weird error message, if you could just wait, walk away for a few hours and come back, it might be the case that it then works fine. I had the same issue yesterday when I was trying to enroll my children in school. It didn't work. I went to the school and embarrassingly made a fuss, and then 2 hours later it worked. So, sometimes it's good to just wait a little bit and then go back and try to submit again. But if it doesn't work, make sure to ping on this submission again. I haven't had a chance to look at this one. So good. This is actually kind of a good question. But I'll still follow it up on anyway. So in week 5, we had the demo. The week 5 was really just to make people more confident in what they're going to submit in week 6. So when you submit your week 5 that kind of optional demo that you can do. My hope is that students will go in, they'll mention some things like, hey, this looks good, but can you add this to it or take it away? An example would be if you're using a template and you demonstrate your final code, some of the suggestions people have been having is, your site looks great, but I'd really like to see what it looked like, what that template looked like before you made any changes. And then yes, you do have time to go in and make those changes. Although my hope really is that you'll be able to upload the exact same video, the exact same link, and the exact same description. But when you do it, you'll be submitting it going, yes, I know I've got this, rather than being worried about it. All right. Let me go over here. So as far as the extras go, I know there's always this weird thing when I'm doing Coursera between trying to make it as accessible for as many people as possible, while at the same time giving you your little checklist of check, 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 because there's something very reassuring about having this roadmap as to what you're supposed to do. So as far as trying to figure out what your 4 extras should be, I know I only included a few. Those were just little suggestions that if you have no other idea what to do, take my 4 suggestions. But I knew that there were people out there who had interesting things that they wanted to do as an extra, and I didn't want to take that opportunity away from them. So for instance, we've got right here, I'm having a little trouble understanding the scope of the requirements, the vague requirements. The requirements for extra, it lists out a few items, but I can't really tell what does or doesn't constitute a unique enhancement, and so I'm uncertain whether I have enough. My site, for the most part, is just a gallery, so I'm not sure what sort of enhancements I can realistically provide. I have modals and a carousel on the front page, but there really isn't any place for input, so I'm not sure what to do. So I don't have a link to the site right here. Whenever you can include a link to maybe a CodePen account or the URL, that's great. But if you don't have it, we can still work with it. Some of the things you can always do is go and work with some of the accessibility. If you're doing something with a lot of carousels, one enhancement is to simply add the carousel. That's a really big thing to add to your site. A second thing you can add to that, though, is when you have a carousel, most of them by default automatically start up. So as soon as you go to the page, the pictures start moving. For accessibility reasons, that's actually not the best approach. You want to let the person on your site control everything. They should be able to dictate when things start, when they stop. So a carousel might be one extra, and then a second extra is adding that little bit of code that it takes to make sure that the carousel doesn't start automatically. You could also go in and make sure that you've done enough with your images so that they all look good in the carousel. You can say, I went in, I modified all my pictures so they had the same height and width so that they didn't get kind of stretched out or skewed when they were in the carousel. You can also do something where you might have an extra, again, dealing with accessibility, where you have a link that describes the images in detail in case people want to learn more about them. Okay. But there's always just kind of like little things you can do. If you're not interested in the accessibility as much as the CSS, you can work with opacity or maybe animations for your site, or even just adding like a little bit of a rotation of the pictures. So there's a lot of things that you can kind of think about, and I know it is very vague. The other thing is, don't forget, you can go, even if you have not submitted yet, you can go into the submissions, look at the gallery, and kind of see what other people have done to get some inspiration for what you might want to do. Quick peek here. Oh. All right. Just going back here for a second. So the earlier question was about validating CSS. One of the things you can check out, although I found that not all the tools are working, is if you go to the validator, the W3 validator, which I'll do right now, there are a number of different tools that you can look at. Okay, so I'm going to go to the validator right here, which you've all seen numerous times. Oops, and you're all very sick of. But if you look way down here near the bottom, you can see the validator checks the markup validity, but they also have other checkers for style sheets. Let's go. You can do, they've got style sheets right over here. They've got mobile content. Now, I tried the checker for the broken links, and it worked on some of my pages, but not all of my pages. So all these tools, you kind of have to realize that there's a little bit of they may or may not work. But if you go to the other validators and tools, you can see that they do have this link. They have their HTML checker, their mobile checker, a CSS validator. The markup validator is something we pretty much do already with the HTML checker. But if you're borrowing code from someone else and you're using XHTML, it might check that for you. And just a few different things that you can kind of play with. Of course, they're not guaranteed. For instance, I'm going to go to this link checker right here. And I will go ahead and just put in http umsi.umich.edu and check it. And I'm going to go there. And you can kind of see down here at the bottom of the page, I'll make this a lot bigger, hopefully. It is going through and it is checking these links. It's finding a link and checking it, finding a link and checking it. This can take quite a bit of time, especially for some sites that have a lot of links. What you want to avoid doing is there's an option called check recursively. You really don't want to do that, because what that would do is it would check a link and then it would check the links in that link. And then if it finds links, it'd check the ones in that one. So you would never want to do the recursive checking unless you know that your site only goes to kind of internal sites. It's not linking off to anybody else. But yep, so you can really check a lot of different things. As a kind of side note, if you're interested in how do they make these tools and how do they come up with these link checkers and different things like that, well, you can always go and take Chuck's Python for Everybody course, where you learn kind of a lot of cool things like that. Yeah, and Liz kind of just followed up with she'd never really noticed those links before. None of us do. I mean, everything is so overwhelming with all the different options, and trying to figure out which ones are good tools and which ones aren't good tools can take forever, which I think is kind of the reason for having courses like this on Coursera, is that if you go out onto the internet, supposedly, you can learn anything. But there was a really good comic strip about this last week where someone starts off, I think it was probably Dilbert, and he's like, it's great that I live in this age where I can learn anything. And then, he clicks in and it's like, well, it only take me about 2 hours to figure out which one of these videos has to do with the version of, of the software that I'm using, and then another 3 hours. So my job on Coursera is to kind of help narrow down some of the things you're looking for. And then hopefully they'll stay, I've got to stop that checker, it's driving me crazy. Hopefully they'll stay valid long enough while we're still doing the course. Okay. All right.
I haven't checked Google Plus.
Oh, okay.
Sometimes people leave things there.
Nope. I don't have many people today. That's not too unexpected. I'm hoping everyone is just finishing up their site for right now. Although I've never quite figured out how I can figure out who are viewers and who aren't. So I'll just go ahead and go back and do a few more questions, hopefully with live office hours. I am going to need to encourage people to watch these so I don't have to keep typing back and forth, hopefully. All right, so we've got that one. Okay, so this is a good question. Oh, present to everyone. Okay. So Kristen went to a site called responsivetest.net to kind of test out her site. And there are a number of different places you can go. I believe there's like a responsive.is. You can use toolbars to check your responsiveness, but it's not unusual for you to type in a URL and have the responsive checker say, oh, nope, it doesn't work, when in actuality it does. So in her site, she went to responsivetest.net, and it wasn't responsive for any device smaller than an iPad mini. But when she views it on her iPhone 5, it looks responsive. And is this type of disparity common? I've set the media queries in my CSS to max width 992 and max width 768. Someone said here that Christos mentioned, hey, here's another place you might want to check. It needs registration, but it's worth it. And then Christos kind of followed up and said, you know, you might want to think about some of your media queries because some smartphones can be as small as 300 pixels. So what I would take from this conversation is a few lessons if I were viewing it. One, you can't always trust the software that's doing the testing. It's always good to go back and kind of check it again. If it's showing that your site is responsive, you can absolutely trust that. But if it's showing that you're not responsive, I would go in and test again. Now, when you put your media queries, we try to move away from having these like hard numbers that you should absolutely test for, 680 or 420, because the size of phones is always changing. Same with the iPads. It's kind of like this always moving scale. But I do know when we were in the CSS class, we did talk about some of the kind of common screen sizes that you might want to hit on. So 900 is pretty wide. What you want to avoid doing, though, is making them too small. I know for a few students, they've put in something like min width 300 pixels, and on their browser refuses to return anything smaller than 480. Even if it's on a device that is smaller than that, it won't really trigger at 300. So I would make your smallest somewhere around 360 to 380 and build up from there. Again, most of the time I just play with it. I put it on and I keep moving my browser screen bigger and smaller to kind of trigger what looks good to me. Instructor replied. One of the things, just to remind people, as far as writing up the description for your site, it doesn't accept Word or PDF documents or things like that. So you really do have to write in a somewhat plain text, although you can write it in HTML if you want. But just the way the system is, because it's not, it's actually Chuck's personal server, there's only so much bandwidth we can have. And having these large files, we just can't support that. One of the things that I think it was Anya mentioned is making the video. And I really encourage people to make the video. It takes much less time than a write-up. It also, can be a little bit intimidating, particularly if English isn't your first language. But let me tell you something, all of us who don't speak a second language are in awe of those of you who can speak any amount of English at all. I think it's really great. I think you'll find that you have a really supportive community here. So go ahead and make that video if you can. You can really show off what you've done, and we can all get a good feel of what you're doing. Here, see it? Okay. The next question from Liz is, when I use Google Chrome Inspect Element, it doesn't respond to my media query. It did it first and then mysteriously stopped. But my page responds when I adjust the size, so I know the media query works. I've Googled the issue, but still have no idea. Any ideas? Yes, I accidentally did something once. I did something once that completely made my media query stop working, and it drove me crazy because I couldn't remember what I had done, but it was absolutely in Google Chrome. And I'm not sure if I can recreate that. I definitely can't recreate it from scratch. But Liz, if you go ahead and post that under week 6, if I can remember how I caused that error, I can absolutely try to recreate it for you. What I can do right here see if I can recreate that error because it really drove me crazy. Well, the first times I used inspect element on Google Chrome, I went ahead and did inspect. And for those of you who wonder how I get my inspect element to pop up here instead of on the side, just, off to the side, there's 3 little buttons, and you can decide if you want to have it in a separate window, if you want to have it on the bottom, if you want to have it, oops, messed that up. Oh, now I did that and I'm going to have trouble. If you want to have it on the side. The reason I don't like having it on the bottom or the side is because when you're doing your responsive design, it's nice if you can see a big debug window without having to see everything else. So when I click on the toggle device toolbar over here, you can kind of see what the page looks like on the mobile view. And you can pick all that, you kind of go back and forth. So I do remember at one point when I was here, I don't remember what I clicked, but I absolutely had the same problem with you of when I toggled it, it wouldn't like respond to the small screen anymore. So I would play with all these buttons along the top and see if you can't get it to kind of unclick. But it isn't, I did the same thing, and now I wish I had written down what the heck I had done. But you're not the first one to have that problem when you're doing the inspect element. So try hitting those buttons on the top. Thanks. And Liz, just since you're still on, I remember you had an issue yesterday that we were going to look at, and I can't remember what it was. But if you remember what it is, go ahead and post it again, and I'll see if I can't take a look at what it was. Go back here. Got doing my best with the I wanted to mention this one just because it was a good note, but it's something that people might not understand completely. But it's a really great starting point for students who want to go on and maybe really specialize in web design. The comment was, if anyone's editing the Bootstrap style sheets directly, I've read that if you download and compile the Bootstrap source code and then place in the directory, you kind of turns into one big style sheet. But I'm afraid I'm going to end up with mud pies if I start experimenting at this point. Anybody else doing this? If it works, it would appear to be much easier than writing your own style sheets from scratch. I believe that in programming, laziness, otherwise known as efficiency and productivity, is a virtue. So one of the things you can do is there's something called less. There's less, and the other one is called SAS. And what these are actually more kind of programming language ways to do your CSS. If you remember with JavaScript, we had the ability to have variables, and we could use those variables to kind of hard code different values all the way through. If you use less or SAS, you have that same kind of ability with your style sheet, where instead of saying something along the lines of font size 16 pixels, you can say font size and come up with a variable name and then kind of change it on the fly. So that's kind of one extra step where you have to be more comfortable with the idea of programming, variables, saving, different things like that. So if you're going to go into web design, learning how to use these tools is absolutely worth it because it will make everything much easier, more efficient. You can be lazier, as you mentioned it. But if you're just doing this to kind of, hey, I want to make websites, and once I make my site, I'm done. Maybe I'll make a few changes. I don't think it's actually worth the time and effort to learn that just for the things you're doing in this class. But absolutely something you're going to want to look at if you decide that you want to go deeper into web design. Okay. Oh, okay. Oh, good. Okay, so just following up with Liz, she had a question yesterday about the sticky footer. I'm curious if what you found, if it was in my code or in your code, because it's not unusual for me to have a typo and do it. Okay, just making sure. So the issue yesterday was just the placement of the body tag with relation to other div tags or really any tag at all. And what happens for a lot of times is, that made no sense. What happens sometimes is that when people are copying and pasting, they grab the body tag or the end body tag, and then you get code that's outside of that. You absolutely, positively need to make sure, oops, when you're writing your code, that all of your HTML should be in here. All right, you want to make sure it's inside that body tag. One, it won't validate if you don't have it this way. It'll say something like unexpected end tag. The other reason is even if you don't care about validation because you say, haha, no one really does that. No, Colleen can't see my code. It will mess up some of your styling. So when you do your code, you'll have your HTML tag, up here at the top. You'll have the head tag with a bunch of stuff and head. Okay. The only thing that was really kind of threw people off this in this capstone is that people were using a lot of Bootstrap. And when you use Bootstrap, right before you end that body tag, this is where you want to put your link to some of your JavaScript and Ajax. Okay, where people go, what? Ajax, JavaScript? Again, this is just if you're using Bootstrap to do some of the kind of responsiveness or anything that had less to do with styling and more to do with interactivity, you needed to put those links down at the very bottom right before you close the body tag. Now, the reason you want to do that, it can be a little bit confusing, but the simplest example I have to describe is when you're doing JavaScript, you're doing a lot with interactivity. And you're saying, take this part of the page and move it or open it or change the style. So if you put in your JavaScript at the top of the page, sometimes that code will be executed before the page has actually been created. So it says run your JavaScript and it goes, oh, okay. And it runs the JavaScript and then it creates the rest of the stuff. So if your JavaScript was supposed to change something that was near the bottom of the page, it already ran, so it won't change anything. Okay. Let me do done. Oops, turn that off. Okay. So we have a question from Gail. Can I postpone my enrollment to the next session? This came at a bad time as I was asked to participate in the Canadian census as an enumerator. I had expected this session to start earlier when I had not committed to the census. Absolutely, Gail. One, I am in envy of Canada's I believe it's 6-week election cycle. I'm very envious of that right here at the moment. And I think it's great that you took the time to do that. You can absolutely move back to the next cohort. It's starting, I believe, September 5th, around that time. We may move it back just 1 week because that's the same week that U of M is starting, and I'd like to make sure that I have time to actually, get everyone started on the capstone and be involved. But you can still start doing the work now if you have the time now, and then it'll be saved for when you start the next capstone. You can see a lot of the questions people are asking and get a little bit of a head start. But as with every other course, you can, if you don't finish it, there is no failure. It's just you'll complete it later. The difference with the capstone is that it's only being offered, it's 6 weeks long and it's being offered every 12 weeks to give like a 6-week break in between, partly because I want to make sure that I have the time to be more involved with the capstone. Here. Give me a second. I'm just going to check out and see if I have any more questions to look at. Okay. That one. So I do have just a quick note. Sorry if I mispronounced your name, but Abdullah said, hey, can you check out my spot, my page? get some additional feedback. I'm going to do that right now since I have no other questions. But if you check out, I believe it's week 4 or 5, there is a discussion forum where people are putting their capstone projects to try to get feedback from one another without submitting. And so you're more likely to get a hit and get some feedback if you go to that site, because that's where kind of everyone's looking. The discussion forums can get overwhelming with everything. All right, so first thing I want to do is make sure that I've got the screen set to the right size. As a teacher, because I'm presenting so often, a lot of times I blow up my screen size so it's really big. And then when I look at student submissions, I'm like, oh, they look weird. And then I realize that's my fault, not the students. So I'm going to blow this up so it might look a little bit different from what other people did. Quick note, I'm going to assume that this is a site from either a template or a framework, just because it has that kind of familiar look and feel to it. Kind of scroll over this. We've got a lot of different links. All right. So what I would do if I were you when you were submitting this portfolio is that you've got a few things here. Aspiring web developer, you have your description. But when you submit this, I would make sure that you point out right away, hey, I've got kind of my 3 pages. Talk about each one of these pages and what you have going on here. On your main page, mention that you used some really interesting fonts. You can also, I don't know if these are font icon, if these are images, talk about where you got those. You clearly have a very cool parallax kind of scrolling thing going on here. Make sure you mention that, because sometimes people are going to be really quick and not notice these things. They might only click on your links and not kind of see the scrolling effect as well. I'm going to go ahead and click on that project to open in a new tab. Okay. One of the things I would try to mention to people or point them in the right direction is whether or not they should be grading these pages or they're just links to something else cool that you're working on. Okay. So for instance, it does appear that this is your CodePen work. So oh, I get it. So you have to type in the whole word. I thought it was more like hangman. So these are each cool things, and I'm definitely going to want to take a look at that code a little bit later as well. And then also, I don't know if this actually works or not. Let's put this in here. Let's do. And one of the things you might want to mention is, oh, good. You don't even have to mention necessarily. I like the fact that you put this in here. Sorry, this feature is currently disabled. Please message me directly using my email, abdul@gmail.com. I like this approach because you showed that you can still create it, even if you don't want to use it. One of the things you may want to think about doing is, even though I'm opposed to the email tag, because I don't like the way it pops open your email client, you can perhaps change this to an email tag, this bottom part to an email tag, so people can just click on it and use it. All right, last thing I'm going to do right here is let's just go ahead and resize the screen and see what goes on. So right away I can see your navigation bar changes, cool carousel to use instead. I can kind of click through. Oh, and what I was going to say is, now notice that when I first came to this page, that the carousel starts going automatically. And that's that's what happens for most people by default. And I said one of the things you might want to do is have it so that it doesn't start until someone tells you to do it. Not required, but a nice option. But what I can see that you've done instead, and I might have not noticed if I wasn't paying attention carefully, is that you have a stop button. So when you talk about your submission, make sure to include that information, because it's a really cool option and something that people might miss. All right. And then down here, I can see that you basically made it so that your form takes up the entire width instead of just part of it. All right. All right. So, okay. So just list that I got inspect element to work just by clicking on stuff until it worked. Thank you. Yeah, that's our dirty secret. When things don't work, you unplug it and you plug it back in again, and you just keep randomly hitting buttons. The difference between someone who's new to programming and someone who's been programming for a while is just the confidence to do that. I have to teach a new course next fall, and it's for students who have been programming for a little while. And what we've found is that there's this kind of area where when you get stuck, you don't know what to do. And so you kind of just give up. And so my job next semester is to create a class where I intentionally get them stuck on a regular basis, and it's their job to go off and have the confidence to randomly hit buttons. Be like, all right, I don't know what this button's going to do, but I have faith that if I hit it, I'll probably be able to fix whatever I did. So that's really what you're going to learn as a programmer is, what, now that you can't really break somebody's web page by clicking on buttons. You want to be careful about clicking on links. You never want to click on a link that has a .exe file on it, for instance. But if you can start feeling confident to go, maybe what happens if I hit the console? Oh, look, there's red. It's a JavaScript error. I don't know how to fix JavaScript. But if you have a job where you're the web designer, not necessarily the web developer, you can at least tell the people, hey, there's an error and it's in JavaScript. Go have the JavaScript person find it. But I'm glad that worked for you, Liz, and you've now learned our secret. In fact, I'm going to share the secret that before every office hours, something doesn't work. And basically all the wires are just pulled out and plugged back in, and magically it works. So good job. That's pretty much, we're running out of time. We've got about 3 minutes left. So I just wanted to thank everyone for coming by and sticking with the course and doing such a great job. And when I talk about doing a great job, I'm not just talking about the people who created those kind of really advanced websites like Claudio. I'm talking about everyone who went in and said, okay, I'm just going to get this done. One of the problems with really any type of school or Coursera or anything is that you get this community of people and you all help each other out and you make your way through it. So then when you're done, everyone that you've been talking to has done the exact same thing as you. So sometimes it feels a little bit less special. And you don't realize, hey, I accomplished a lot because everyone nearby you has accomplished the same thing. So my recommendation is if you have young children who still admire you, show them your work because they'll say, that's the best thing ever. Don't show it to any teenagers. They'll immediately hate it no matter what. So show it to the very young or the very, very, very old, and they will appreciate all the work that you put into your websites. And so I think that all of you came away with hopefully a little bit more knowledge, a little bit more confidence in what you're doing. There was a request for a graduation ceremony. I'm looking into that. If it does happen, I will send out an email next week to let everybody know. And I did want to apologize. I know that at the end of every course, you get this kind of automated email from the instructor. I don't remember making it. So there's a really good chance that some of you who have already finished the course got a really generic email from me that says pretty much nothing. So I'm going to update that email this weekend. Make sure that when you finish, you're getting some real information, some real congratulations. And for those of you who have already finished and you got that email, I want to say again, great job, and I hope you got a lot out of the course. Okay. I have 1 minute left, Sai, but I ended so eloquently, I'd like to hit stop. So I think I'm going to do that anyway.
Okay.
Thanks for attending.